Hi everybody, Todd dammit Kerns here again. Today brought to you by our fine friends at Prestige Guitars. Check them out, best in the West and East, all over. Today marks the very first episode of the second year. We're starting the second year of Todd dammit Kerns Talks To. We did 52 weeks with everybody. We had a lot of bass players, Glenn Hughes, Duff McKagan, Frank Bello, tons. Today is no different, but this man is a master. As a young man, he played with Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers, Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, In the Firm. He went on to put together the supergroup Blue Murder with John Sykes, Carmine Appice. He's done a million great things. He is the king of the fretless bass guitar and a hell of a storyteller and a hell of a good friend of mine, ladies and gentlemen, Tony Franklin. There you go.
Well, thank you.
It's been announced.
Thank you for that, whoever you are.
yeah. The robot voice that's haunting us. So I was just commenting on you've got some Tony Franklin basses back there, as you should.
Yes, yeah, they just happen to be here, perfectly placed. Yes.
Yeah, not everybody has a bass that's just carries their name, or even.
No, look at that double bass in the background, though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got it off a guy on Craigslist years ago. I went through this whole rockabilly phase, and Slim Jim Phantom used to used to come to Vegas and jam, and I'd be like, well, I can't jam with Slim Jim Phantom on an electric. I've got to get, kind of. So I sort of would noodle around, but it's a whole other animal. It's quite disrespectful to think that I could do what the rockabilly guys do on those things.
It's a different. I mean, upright bass is a whole different world. But then you take the rockabilly thing. We actually in 93, 94, I was touring with Paul Rodgers, and Lee Rocker was opening up.
Oh yeah,
and he showed me his calluses, and it's like this huge. He said if he showered, he had to keep his hand out of the water. I didn't smell his callus, but
oh, so he didn't want them to get wet and lose his calluses.
Yeah, I mean, which I understand that. I guess you got to shower, haven't you? And how do you wash?
Yeah, that sounds rather extreme.
But I didn't ask about that stuff. It's like it was a metaphor for illustrating how he protects his calluses. Because I actually, and this was Whitesnake, I swam 2 days in a row. This is 97, and then my callus came off in one big flap. I'm like,
oh no.
Whoops. That was a painful gig that night. But
I would imagine so. Yeah. No, I think the rockabilly thing is a whole your picking hand. What do you want to call it? Your there's a whole big slappity slap thing going on that creates a percussive thing as well on top of it, depending on
it's
how.
It's very very physical and percussive and all of that. Yeah, it's its own thing. I mean, that
it is,
and classical upright bass, they're like night and day.
They really are. So you didn't start on. Actually, let's go back, because I'm always very curious, because you're, such a respected player. I don't know, where did you kind of come from, a background of schooled, that kind of world, or did you fall into bass guitar as a rock and roller?
It's kind of a bit of both, really, to be honest, because I was brought up with both. My mother is strictly classical.
Okay.
But she played saxophone, and she played the drums and multi-instrumentalist.
Oh, wow.
But she grew up classically, as were my grandparents, so I played a lot with them. But my dad was he could read, but he was mostly by ear. But my parents had a band.
Oh,
we're talking about going back to the 50s and 60s. They played, and so
wow.
they played a gig the night before I was born. My mum on the sax. So
wow.
So it was, and that was all covers. That was rock. It was, but whatever was popular at the time as well.
Of course, yeah.
And so I had that, but I played with them from being 5 years old. But it was all different instruments. Sometimes I play the drums. Sometimes I sing a bit. Sometimes I play whatever, just different things. And so I could read music from a very young age, but I also could play by ear as well.
Right.
So, uh, 7 years old, I was like doing pretty advanced theory stuff. It's like I didn't
Wow.
think of it at the time. It was just like that's how it was in our house,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I didn't. You don't. You just. It's like it was normal to me. So then the only child. So when my parents were rehearsing one day without me, I was making a nuisance of myself because I wanted to play. I'd be about 11 years old. So
Okay.
my mum pulled out this bass guitar, which I don't ever remember seeing before.
Interesting.
And that was it. The thing descended like the heavens opened up and the lights and the angels. Oh, and this thing descended. And I'm like, wow, this. She showed me the names of the strings, where to put my fingers, and that was it. I said, this is the instrument I've been waiting for. Everything made sense about it. I kind of instinctively had a sense of it. I was playing gigs on it 3 days later.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
At how old?
at 11 years old.
Oh my God. That's
So,
crazy.
and at that time, that was the 70s. So my parents played a lot of gigs. I mean, around Christmas time, we'd play for 3 weeks straight.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was getting a lot of experience playing and all different styles, just ballroom dancing and the current rock and roll and oldies and backing cabaret artists, all of that. So it was a crash course, learning very, very quickly, but just having a blast. So
That's so crazy. So did your parents meet because of music or did they?
yeah, actually, my mum put an advert in the paper because she needed a piano player. And
Who
it
knew she
did.
was getting a husband? Yeah.
Well, yeah, the husband wasn't part of the ad,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
she had a duet kind of thing with another gal, and
Okay.
they had a long history. They called themselves the Globetrotters.
Love it.
So they needed a piano player, so my dad applied and got the gig in more ways than one. So
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
and then they just toured and played and kept doing that, and I was born right into that. It was fantastic.
It's so funny. I mean, like, because, I mean, a lot of people, they start playing music at the behest of their parents, or, or it's sort of like, it's sort of met with a certain degree of like, what? But with you, it was sort of like almost not an expected thing, but a very sort of open, kind of like, yeah, play music, whatever. You can clearly make a career, or augment your career with music. Yeah.
There was no talk of a career. It was for me. It was that's what they did. But they also later on, my dad had a day job as well. He wanted
Sure.
to be, they weren't touring the world or anything like that. They were doing all covers. But at that time in Britain, especially, there were gigs everywhere. I mean, there were bands everywhere. That was
Right.
before karaoke. It was before DJs had even come to light. So there was
Of
none of
course.
that. People booked live bands, and so
Yeah.
there was music everywhere. And so it was, to me, it wasn't even thought of as being, oh, this is something. It was just, I loved it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was all around me. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody played. So it was just a way of bonding with the family. And it was later that I started to really develop that love and passion for it that thought that doors just opened,
Yeah.
different things. You don't think about it. I just kind of went from one thing to another, which didn't teach me very good business skills because I thought that's just how life was.
Sure.
You go somewhere and then somebody offers you another gig, and
Yeah. 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 Well, which, we carry that with us into adulthood, don't we, to some degree?
we do,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So where in England were you? You've told me this before, but
Derby, England,
Derby, right.
spelt Derby, of course. Everybody
Right.
says Derby over here.
Right, right. And that's sort of Midland.
Shameful.
Is that, yeah, of course, yeah. And that's sort of Midlands, is it?
It's right in the middle. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. It could be right, just bang center of England.
So you would travel around to different places for
Oh yeah,
gigs?
we
Yeah.
we'd go all around. I mean, we do like 4 dates, long weekend in the north of England, Middlesbrough, a place called Grimsby, which was a fishing town. I mean, we played the fishermen's working men's club, and that was
Yes.
me at 40. 12 years old playing the clarinet in a fisherman's working club. It's smoky and full of fishermen and all that. And I play, I don't know if you know this, but there's a tune called Stranger on the Shore by Bilk.
Okay, yeah.
And it was released in 62, huge hit in England.
Okay.
And so I would play that on the clarinet, brought the house down. And all these fishermen like, yeah, woo, bring that boy back and play Stranger on the Shore.
Are there literally just all like a full sausage party, all men in there? Or are there not women like?
Well, you know, it's like there are women, but the fishermen's wives, they were
see.
tough.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Going out on the ocean and on the North Sea, and it's brutal. So they were a special breed.
They really were, yeah. Now, is this like playing bingo places and things like this? I always read about these English gigs, like everybody from Sting to everybody else was playing these similar, traveling around England playing like all kinds of places. But what a great thing that there was this sort of circuit of gigs, of places to play.
It was my musical education. I mean, honestly, that went away with the 80s. I was playing in a 10-piece band in the early 80s. I was professional at that point, and it was slowly getting cut back because they had a DJ. There were two bands originally, then went down to one band, and and then I say it's before karaoke. But during that time, it was perfect timing for me because that's where I say I got all my musical education. I mean, I went into the firm young.
Yeah, very
I'd
young.
already had thousands of hours and thousands of gigs at that point from 5 years old. I mean, it's like I've been gigging almost 18, 17 years by the time I hit the firm. So it's crazy, really.
Yeah, well, it really says a lot about, I mean, that kind of thing is so important because you would have probably, I mean, I don't know if you ever remember experiencing stage fright, but I mean, you would have been literally, that would have been weaned out of you long before these kind of like higher profile gigs presented themselves for yourself.
We'll get into a little psychology here because, I had plenty of stage fright.
Did you?
And, Oh yeah, and
but you were like a child, so I mean, are you saying like, did it continue, or is it something that kind of?
Absolutely.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it comes from your own self confidence because you learn to deal with it.
Okay.
But I had a lot of bullying in my growing up.
Really?
Right. And that really knocked a lot of confidence. I mean, years, constantly.
Jeez.
And I mean, so I was terrified of mostly male figures.
Sure.
So and so I used to, of course, the rock and roll years, the 80s. I dulled a lot of that with drink and all that.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, thankfully, I mean, all the rest of the firm and everybody were partying too at that point.
Sure, yeah.
And so it fit right in. It would almost be odd if you didn't party at that stage.
Right, yeah. They'd have been suspicious of you. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, now I'm a nice, clean, living, wholesome boy and all that.
Yeah.
Calm my nerves through meditation. But even now, like walking down the street, if I see a certain presence or a male figure that looks a certain way or has a vibe, very, very sensitive to energy and vibes, as a lot of musicians are.
Sure.
And I can pick up on certain energy and it will freak me out. So learn through therapy. Yes, I did therapy for this.
Good for you, yeah.
And to control it, but I still have to consciously do that, meaning that if I feel, I have to reason my way out of it to start with, right?
Right.
A reason. Okay, there's not a speeding train coming towards me. There's not a bull charging at me. There's not somebody holding a gun at me. Just breathe and grab a hold of it, and you're safe. You're okay.
Sure.
Even to this day, that comes up. I mean, bullying is more than just something that happens in childhood. It stays with you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's a PTSD that you would carry most of your life, clearly,
yeah, yeah. And as you get older, you do deal with it, and you get your confidence. And of course, when I cleaned up and sobered up in the early 90s, then all of this came back with a vengeance.
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah.
was dulling it before, running
Yeah.
away from it, dulling the fear, the intrepidation, because there's no way I could have played with Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers and all that situation if I
Right.
was like anxious and all that.
Of course, but you bring up an interesting point because there's sort of a perception of England that sometimes people think of like the well, darling, and a cup of tea and this sort of thing, and then you go there and then you realize, oh yeah, there's the whole other side about, which of course you're aware of too, is this full on, hey, what you looking at, the full soccer hooligan, and hard dudes who would sooner punch you than say hello, and that's yeah. And I'm not dissing anything. I just realize that that's the same as America or Canada or wherever you are. There are the stereotypically nice people, and then there's going to be a hard edge no matter where you are. Yeah.
And it will vary depending on the area. I mean, you get some I think it has shifted a little bit. There's a lot more emphasis on mental health and bullying. It still goes on.
Of course, yeah.
But you go to towns and cities that are working towns, like where they have the steel mills and where they have the shipbuilding.
And the fishing.
Yes, and the fishing. They are tough people. Just because that is required of them for that line of work, and the whole city, the town, is geared around that industry. There's no, I mean, where Sting and actually Brian Johnson and Paul Rodgers all came from the
Newcastle.
The same area.
Yeah.
And that was the steelworks. That was the shipping.
Right. Yeah.
It was tough people came from there.
Sure, yeah.
And so there really weren't too many ways out of it either. I think that's one of the reasons why they developed their art, their craft, because it was a way out. And so a lot of people do that. I mean, it's like the Beatles. Liverpool is a tough place too.
And it's interesting because a lot of musicians, and I don't mean to just generalize us, but we all are sort of more cut from a sensitive cloth. We're sort of tend to be a little bit more thoughtful and fragile and just want to play music. And it's not necessarily, if you don't sort of, fall in with that tough crowd, like being from Canada, it's sort of like, it's all hockey and, and it's sort of like, but I just want to play music. I don't really want to be, crashing into another grown man and then possibly getting punched in the face for it. I just wanted to play music. And I think that, when you grow up in that, you kind of feel like very alien to what's around you.
Yeah. I mean, the nature of being a musician is being sensitive to and very aware of sounds and what's happening, the fast-changing dynamics of a gig and a recording. It's like you are naturally sensitive. Derby was a tough town too. I mean, there were. I don't know if there are any other musicians that I'm aware of that came from there.
Yeah.
The only one I am aware of, and I'm probably showing my ignorance by not naming some musicians, funnily enough, was because I was born in a small village of about 500 people called Willington.
Okay.
About 4 miles outside of Derby.
Okay.
And John Wetton, the bass player from Asia. King Crimson, all that.
Yep.
He was born in the same village.
Is that right? Wow.
And about 10 years earlier, but a small village,
Interesting.
500 people, and 2 bass players came from
2 very successful bass players. That's amazing. Wow.
Must be something in the water.
Exactly. So is it Roy Harper that connects you to Jimmy Page? I actually wondered this. Yeah. So how did you fall in with Roy Harper? For those that don't know, Roy was initially considered one of the vocalists for an early Led Zeppelin or post Yardbirds kind of thing. Wasn't that the plan? Wasn't there some talk of that?
Roy being that? No, I don't think he was ever going to be the singer in it.
I thought I heard some rumor that, I probably just because Jimmy was fond of Roy and all that, I assumed.
Yeah, they go way back. I mean, I think Terry Reid was one of the ones.
Terry, sure, yeah.
But not Roy, but he opened for them.
Okay.
On certain shows, and of course, there's Hats Off to Harper on.
Hats Off to Harper, yeah.
And then there's a bunch of albums that that Roy did that Jimmy guests on.
That's right. Yeah.
Most famously, one called Stormcock, and Jimmy guests under the name Flavius Mercurius.
Oh, wow. Wow, what a creative
they didn't
one.
want to draw. They just had a connection, and Roy was doing a lot of the alternative tuning, open tuning stuff, the folk stuff, way before anybody else.
Did he turn Jimmy onto that?
I believe he would have had to, because they were so close and they shared ideas and played together. Yeah. So, you know, it's fascinating, and of course, Roy sang on "Have a Cigar" with Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here.
Yeah,
and so. He's just one of those highly respected players, musicians, writers, kind of a little bit of an eclectic secret to a lot of the players, to the players and the fans.
Right.
The ones that know him and get him really just adore him.
Right.
He is such worth checking out, Roy Harper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So once again, that was part of my turn up at one gig and then another gig shows up phase, where that happened with Roy. I mean, went in on a chance recording session with him and didn't know a thing about him, and I was 20 years old at the point, had the shortest hair, blonde stripe down one side and all that, and and knew nothing. I mean, I was not a fan of Zeppelin. I knew nothing of Roy or
yeah. Now hearing your upbringing, I understand, because I read recently where you had posted something about like, well, I wasn't really aware of Led Zeppelin, so you were not all that freaked out when you started playing with Jimmy, because clearly your background is so much more eclectic as far as like ballroom music and whatever popular music was. It wasn't necessarily about like, you know, here's Led Zeppelin, you know.
Well, it's very interesting because I loved rock and roll, their song Rock and Roll.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was on a jukebox. It was a regular place we went to, my parents' band.
Okay.
You could actually buy it as a single, and on the B side of it was 4 Sticks.
Okay. Dung, dung, dung,
yeah.
dung, dung, dung,
yeah.
Weird,
love it now.
Weird time signature on that. I've never really quite figured it out.
Oh, yeah.
You probably know better than me.
Well, I won't even bother going into it, but yeah, it's fascinating how it flows. It goes between 5 and then a 6th thing, but
yeah, it's
crazy. Then there's 4. So, but the way it flows is masterful. But at the time, 14 or 15 years old, I did not get 4 Sticks. I hated it. I thought, because Plant's vocals is just kind of scatting and doing this kind of, very weird part.
It's weird. Yeah, it's a weird song.
What would you sing over that? I mean, come on. He came up with something. Now I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But at that time, and so it completely turned me off Zeppelin, right?
Interesting.
So, I heard you didn't hear any Zeppelin on the radio.
No.
Nothing over there in the UK. None of my friends were into it. And so I just didn't pursue it or hear anything. And
of course.
Yeah, it served me well, probably, because I just took Jimmy and the band as it was, at face value.
Sure.
Go in and make great music together.
So was there an audition process? I mean, is it like, or is it just kind of like that kid that plays with Roy is amazing, get him?
No, it was, Jimmy and myself hung together for about a month or so while we were working with Roy. So we kind of, we were just getting along, and it was just all about the music. Yeah,
sure.
I couldn't.
The music and the hang, Tony. If you're a good hang, yeah.
Yes, which apparently I was.
Yeah, clearly.
So we got along, and we did some gigs, and it was cool with Jimmy and Roy and myself, and then he called me, and this was how it was worded. They've been playing together with different drummers and with different bass players, and with Paul and that, because they'd done the Arms tour together in '83. So they went back way back, of course, Badco and Swan Song and all that.
Sure, yeah.
So they were friends and but Paul left it with Jimmy to round up the band.
Okay, yeah.
And so Jimmy called me and said, "Hey, do you want to sit in on the rehearsals?"
Okay. That's a very safe way to, it's kind of like asking a girl on a date, but just sort of not calling it a date or something.
Yeah. You just wanna hang.
You want to get a coffee, or whatever. Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, it was very, very low key. And
Okay.
he and I were low key anyway. I have such fond memories of just hanging and laughing and just being, just laughing and making music.
How much older was he than you at this point? I mean, it's funny enough, he's the same distance, that much older than you now, but yeah. Yeah. But you're 20 years old and he's what? He wasn't that old though, was he really? I mean, when you think about it.
Not at that point. No, let me work it out. What is he? 77 now. I'm 59. God, I was 20 when
you look amazing for 59, my man.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about that a whole lot after this. Yeah. How has that happened? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so what would he be? So he's 18 years older than me.
Okay. Wow.
So, he's 20. I was 20. He's 38.
Oh my goodness.
38 sounds really young now, but
it does now. Yeah. But
at that point, he was a 38-year-old who'd changed music history and wrote some of the greatest anthems ever known to rock.
Yeah.
I was unaware.
And Led Zeppelin was in the rearview mirror for him already. That's weird to think about, like by his mid-30s.
Yeah. And this was the first band that he'd been in since Led Zeppelin. So I had none of that perspective. I didn't even think about that. I just went and we made music. So I'd been so young playing with my parents being so young, I was used to playing with older players because there weren't too many 6-year-olds who were playing gigs with me.
Yeah, exactly. That's not very common. No, yeah.
But so it all just felt very, very comfortable. And then we rehearsed and rehearsed. They were working up the new album and bringing in new songs and all that. Some of them were already written, and so we were just playing them down. I wasn't.
So when you're sitting in with a bass guitar in your hands, playing along.
It was like, I mean, in hindsight, we were rehearsing.
Yes.
We were just getting on with business. They were getting ready to do the album.
Okay.
That was not conveyed to me. It may have been. I mean, I knew they were going to go in and do the album, but at that point, I wasn't in on it. I was just, playing and seeing how it felt. It was, as you said, it's about the hang.
Of course.
And so as much as the plan.
Before we jump into that, you're already playing fretless bass at this point. I mean, the Firm record is sort of one of the first things I remember. I don't know what the history is, but the first time I'm hearing, the fretless bass going, what the hell is that? Like, what is going on over there? That sounds so different than everything else that I've heard to this point, so you become known as that guy. And to this day, you're known as that guy. So where did you discover this? I mean, was the fretless bass like a common thing by this point? Or was it just sort of like when it fell out of the heavens into your hands? I assume that when you found the fretless bass, that also fell out of the heavens in your hands. And this is what I've been looking for.
Kind of, not really.
Did you do the old like knock some frets out of a bass and then none of that stuff?
No. I mean, it's... Yeah, there's always been this sense of inevitability with my life. You don't always get to see it until afterwards, right? Until you get to see how things play out. It's kind of amusing, really. But the first bass, of course, was a fretted bass, and so I wasn't even aware of fretless at that point.
No,
it was 1979. I've been doing some gigs with a jazz quartet. I'm not a jazz player by any stretch of the imagination, but I could hold it down and walk over changes, solo and forget it. But anyway, so the band leader of that was a guy called Johnny Patrick, and I'd be 16 or 17 at this point. And he very kindly put me up at his place to stay overnight because it was late gigs and it was in Birmingham, England. And
another tough town.
Another tough town has produced many great musicians. I mean, you know,
Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Duran, oddly enough.
absolutely. But I mean, Robert Plant and
That's right.
and John Bonham are from that region too,
That's
and
right.
Glenn Hughes.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
so many that have come from that region.
The
So
Black Country.
the
So,
Black Country, indeed.
yeah,
Judas Priest, if I didn't say
yeah,
him already.
yeah.
But anyway, so one night he just said to me, he said, "Here, listen to this." And I put the headphones on me. It was Jaco Pastorius's first solo album.
Oh, sure.
A few years after its release, it was released in '76, so this was '79. I was like, "Whoa, that's amazing!" And never heard a bass like that have that kind of presence, and of course his playing.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, of course, yeah.
So at that point, I was like, I have to have a fretless bass.
Right.
And so, but I was very much, I did not like the jazz bass. I still don't own one to this day.
Interesting. It's funny that you say that because I've been on a bit of a Geddy Lee kick, and we've been talking a lot about. I always find the jazz bass is an odd animal. The tiny little headstock.
Yeah.
Fret area. It's just
Yeah.
it's hard to get used to. I find the P bass so much more my animal. But yeah, but go on.
Yeah, definitely. I did not vibe with the jazz bass at all. So I knew
That's what Jaco played, though. Yes.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, he did. So it's like, okay, well, hey, I'm a precision player. I still am to this day. That's all I have.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad saw in a music paper that the bass center in London had these fretless precision basses for sale, unlined. I knew I wanted unlined. I don't know why, but
meaning there was no fret markings drawn on the. Okay.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, so we went down on the train with my parents and picked out a precision bass, the one that would end up being the firm fretless.
Really? How old are you at this point?
I'd be 17.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so it's like, and I picked up this fretless bass. I'm looking at it right now. And,
you still have it. That's so awesome that you still have it.
That's yeah.
Amazing.
I've let some basses go, but I have my first fretted precision bass I got in 76, and then this one that I got in 79.
So is it a 79?
Yes, it's a 77, but I got it in 79. So it shows how long it had been on the shelf.
So nobody wanted it?
Well, here's the irony of this. When, before that point, the fretless precision, which is irony, isn't it? A precision bass.
Yeah, there's no preciseness about this. Yeah.
It was called a precision bass, by the way, because when it first came out, was it 51?
Okay.
It was meant to draw in a lot of the upright bass players because bands were getting louder. Rock and roll was starting to emerge. They needed to keep up. And so they called it the precision bass because it was a marketing thing because, it's the first bass where you can play precisely because it has the frets.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there you go.
So, the name stuck even though it was fretless because it doesn't have the frets. But anyway, when Jaco came on the scene, nobody wanted a fretless precision anymore. They wanted a jazz bass with the lines.
Right, I see.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that fretless precision actually went away. It was stopped being produced. I don't know when, but it must have been right around that time. There's another, inevitable destiny thing. Sure. I was meant to have one of those basses. This my time in history and the manufacture, because they were probably only on the market from I think 71 to like 78, 79 or something.
Wow. Okay.
And so I got one, and it's like, this is different. I thought I was pretty cool on the fretted bass because I could play chords.
Right. Yeah.
Tried to play one on the fretless. It's like, oh, this is ugly.
So is that a kind of a case of like you're already up and running and now you have to learn how to crawl again or walk again kind of thing?
It was pretty much like that, but I was still doing gigs. I didn't woodshed hard on the fretless. Because it's like, it wasn't something I needed to do. In fact, the first gig I took the fretless out on was with that jazz band, and he had his wife was an amazing vocalist. I was so out of tune, and I've been playing it a couple of years at this point. People get discouraged about the fretless, say, well, it's so hard to play in tune. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're not going to, it doesn't happen overnight. People get discouraged. One of my errors, shall we say, that I learned in hindsight is not playing along to any kind of tuning reference.
Okay.
You know, nowadays, in fact, I have my own fretless bass course with True Fire.
Yes. That highly recommended.
Oh, thank you. It includes a lot of play along tracks, because you play by yourself, you don't have a reference of how the tuning's doing.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, yeah, I think I'm doing okay. And then you start playing with others, and it's like, doesn't play well with others. So I was like, okay, I'm not there yet. And this was, say, a couple of years into having it. And so it really wasn't until 1984, 83 possibly. 83, I was still full-time fretted.
Okay.
84, I was like, okay, I'm feeling good about this. Roy wanted some fretless on some tracks, so it's like, okay, I have to, you know, get the fretless in shape. The first time he used it on an album was Roy's 1982 album called Work of Heart.
Okay.
So it's a long way of telling you this about how I started with the fretless, but it's all relevant.
I love it. Yeah.
It's all relevant. So anyway, so I decided to use the fretless on those gigs with Roy and Jimmy and the recording. That's when I kind of made the decision to become the fretless player.
Wow. Okay.
And that was the same year, the firm, right?
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. It wasn't like I hadn't been playing it a few years at that point. I had, but not, you know, as my main gig. So
sure. Yeah.
So here's the funny part, right? I'd heard that Pino Palladino had been sitting in with Jimmy and Paul and Chris Slade.
Okay.
In my mind, I only knew of Pino as a fretless player. That's what he did. He was on a lot of sessions, Haircut 100, a lot of bands that were, you know, and I only knew, and Paul Young, of course.
Right.
And it's all fretless and beautiful, beautiful playing.
Yeah.
So I thought, in my mind, I reasoned. They like Pino. He plays the fretless. They must like the fretless. I'll take the fretless. It's the only bass I took. I didn't even take a fretted bass. I mean, how blazing is that? It's like, but you know, it's just it was youth and ignorance and just me reasoning things out.
Sure.
And that, once again, that kind of inevitability.
Yes.
That happened. I didn't know at this point that Boz Burrell of Badco played fretless.
Oh, I didn't know that either, actually.
Yeah. You listen on Feel Like Making Love, you can hear it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Wow.
Boom, 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 all that stuff. It's pretty cool stuff. I didn't even know that song at that point. But so,
right.
And Andy Frazier with Free was 16 or so when he was in the band. So there's Paul probably had it in his mind that there's fretless is okay and young bass players are okay.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't say anything about the fretless. They didn't say anything negative. So I just kept going.
Right.
And then it ended up being my instrument. And it was not a conscious decision. It was just, once again, that flow of things that happened. Radioactive was not, I wasn't aware of that being the single when we were
working on it. Yeah.
So it was just another song on the album. And so my mind, it's like, okay, there's the intro, there's the drums, the acoustic guitar. There's a little gap there where something needs to happen. I always think like a songwriter. I always do, with bass lines, with the whole thing. And so it's like, oh, there's an opportunity for the bass to do something cool. So that little sliding harmonic, I don't remember the first time I did it, but that was right in there. Of course, that ended up being the opening single, and the first thing that people heard of me was that sliding harmonic, and people trying to figure out what that was.
I know, it's super effective. I mean, when you hear it, you're like, How is that? Like, I'd never heard anything like that before.
Yeah. And so it's fascinating, really. All in hindsight, it was not. It just happened. It really did.
That's so great. I mean, so then, how long were you with Roy?
First from 1982, and then, but I kept recording with him through the 90s. So
Oh, you did?
been
Okay.
on, and I've did an album with him a couple of years ago. So I've been solidly with him probably 7 or 8 albums. So
Oh wow, okay, yeah, that was that. Because when you look at your resume or your discography, it's like it looks like you were playing with him for a lot longer, but you were kind of coming in and out, just more session work at that point, I suppose, huh?
yeah. But at that time, we actually those were the days of actually getting together.
Of course, yeah.
I toured with him quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and so we did that. 1983 was pretty much all Roy.
Right.
And so yeah, we did a lot of stuff together, but it was spread out.
So the firm is your first trip to America? Is that what brought you to America the first time?
Yep.
And what was that like? I always wonder this because, as a non-American myself, as an immigrant, it's sort of like that feeling of like New York City and Los Angeles and all of it. I mean, it's like, I always watch those, Sex Pistols documentaries of them just like staring out the window of the, endless landscape of a bus, what was that like for you?
Well, I was 22. And,
yeah, you're just a kid too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a mind explosion.
Really?
The first city we went to was Dallas.
Okay.
Which was, we're driving from the airport. And everything just, of course, looks so big.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I've never seen billboards on the side of the road, and
right, yeah,
massive roads and open plains and all that. It's like, wow, everything's so big, and people seem very loud to me.
Everything's bigger in Texas, as the expression
goes. Of course,
yeah.
You didn't know this at the time.
yeah.
Like, so every day was just an adventure. And,
I bet, yeah.
It was fantastic. I mean, Chris Slade, he was like watching over me closely.
Was he older too? I mean, is he more like those guys' age? I can't.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're literally like the youngest guy in the entire run. Yeah.
I mean, oh yeah, and I was so unstreet. I mean, I was kind of sheltered. Only child, and
sure,
my mother doted over me and all that stuff, and protected me and all that stuff, and I mean, the first time I went to Europe with the firm,
yeah,
I left my passport in the suitcase.
You'll need that.
Through customs, and I tell the tour manager, I don't have my passport. It's in the suitcase. Chris Slade. Now this is 1984, right? So Chris Slade. He couldn't get away with this now. He made out that he was my dad.
So he's probably 18 years older. Technically, that's possible. Yeah,
it's feasible. Yeah. So I look so young and all that, and so he said, "Oh yeah, he's not done this very often. He left his suit. He's left his passport and this. Will you just let him through? I'll vouch for him." They didn't ask for names or anything. I mean, nowadays,
that doesn't fly now. Yeah.
But so they were keeping a very close eye on me through all that. I mean, the firm, everything was just done top level. I mean,
I bet, yeah. So you got spoiled pretty well with the travel and the hotels. Yeah.
Four Seasons hotels.
Of course.
We all had our own limousines. We had a plane with the name of the band on the side. I mean,
wow.
It's crazy. I thought my life was going to be like that forever.
Sure, yeah.
We quickly get humbled,
Yeah. Well, you usually start humbled and then kind of end up in that kind of world. But yeah, it's all backwards.
I was humbled and then I elevated. Then I was humbled again, and it's just been good because it gives you a very good perspective and reality and an empathy too.
Absolutely.
It's like if my life had stayed like that, then I don't know. Your perspective gets a little.
I think that's how people get a little bit weird in this business or in show business in general. That,
yes.
At 23 years old, people hand you the keys to the kingdom and your sense of reality is completely skewed. Yeah.
And you forget where you came from. It's
Absolutely.
Like it is not reality, and it's so fleeting. It can pass by and be taken away very, very quickly. I mean, we've all seen that. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
we've seen. I mean, I've brushed with death more times than I care to. Sometimes through recklessness, sometimes through, just life. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I can say by the grace of whatever that I'm still here, and
And you look
it was
20
touching.
years younger than you are, sir. So, you've done something right. That deal with the devil contract is coming up. Preferably not. So was the firm always seen as more like a project to those guys? I mean, it's hard for you to probably have the perspective of what those guys were thinking as just two very successful cats who decided they were going to do something fun together and then kind of go back to whatever they were doing. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, they connected on, of course, as I mentioned, they have their history.
Mm-hmm.
They know each other a long time, and great friends, great respect between them. They did the Arms tour together.
Right.
As the multiple sclerosis benefit for Ronnie Lane, and
Right.
everybody came out for that. I mean, it was Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and
Townsend, guys like that.
Yeah, Townsend, and Simon Phillips was playing drums, and
right,
all that. And Jimmy and Paul actually performed Midnight Moonlight, which ended up on the second album, which is instrumentally was a Led Zeppelin idea called Swan Song, ironically.
Oh, wow.
Never came to fruition, and then Paul wrote the lyrics, and so that was kind of the spurring thing. That's like, oh, do you want to have a go? Do you just want to have some fun? It was really about having some fun and playing some music. I mean, they had nothing to prove. No. They didn't need it financially, so it's like, why not just go out there and have some fun? And so it really was about that for them, and it was always going to be a 2-album thing right from the beginning.
Okay, so at least were you aware of that?
Yeah. It was in the contract. So it was,
okay,
but there was an option for a third.
I see.
I think the albums did the second album did okay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't didn't have quite the impact of the first, and the shows were ridiculous. It was they were out of control. The audiences were wild. They loved it. But,
I don't know what the equivalent of that would be today. I'm trying to think of two very, very successful artists, coming together and doing that is, it's just a no-brainer. Yeah. The promoters were probably very, very happy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I think in hindsight, it would have been great to have taken a year off.
Sure. Yeah.
And then come back and do it, because they both went off and did musical things.
Mm-hmm.
Paul did the Law with Kenny Jones and all that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and which didn't have the impact of the firm.
No.
And then Jimmy did Outrider and all that.
That's right.
And
you're involved in Outrider as well, yes?
I was, I was involved in the whole thing actually, but things went a little south, and I don't want to get into that.
No, that's all right. Yeah.
But I'll save that for the memoir.
Exactly. Yeah,
yes.
That's where you save that for. Yeah.
But,
So what does life look like for you when you step out of the Four Seasons and you're back in Derby, or how does it? Were you living in London by this point? Where were you hanging your hat?
Oh gosh, yeah, I had family and all that, and I was just doing different things, and so it was pretty humbling, and but also living a very reckless lifestyle. I mean, once you think you're a rock star, then that's trouble until you realize you're not.
Yeah, exactly. Life will have a way of reminding you that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. So,
we've all had that reminder.
Yeah, exactly. So it took a few years, and I was still. But of course, then that's when I did a gig with Kate Bush and David Gilmour. Was asked to be part of Pink Floyd in 1988, which I couldn't do. I had to turn it down. It was heartbreaking, but that's because I'd already committed to Blue Murder. So, that led on to that, and that was just one big party, and we made some great music in the process. So,
did you know John from England, John Sykes, with the Blue Murder Project, or so you met him somewhere after that? He was post Whitesnake, you're post the firm. Let's put together a super group, essentially. I mean, with Carmine, it's essentially, again, like it was another super group. Except you are part of the supergroup now. Like you're actually like a guy with the resume that, you know, you're not just a kid that they pulled out of the streets of Derby to be in another supergroup. Now you're actually the guy from that group. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I knew nothing of John Sykes. In fact, it was Cozy Powell that called me.
Okay.
And I knew of him, of course.
Was Cozy involved in Blue Murder?
He was the original drummer.
Oh, okay. So, well, that'd have been a very interesting group.
Yeah, it would have been. And, you know, Cozy was great. We got along great. But even then, as great as he is, it didn't feel like musically it was the right chemistry for the music.
Interesting.
It was different. It was different. It was still good, but it was different. Carmine has a different kind of swing to his playing.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, so, and Cozy is a lot more straight and, you know, straight ahead rock kind of thing. And so it was, the music needed that swing. We didn't realize at the time because it's like, hey, this is Cozy Powell. He's amazing.
He's a legend,
and, yeah, we had so much fun together. He was just, we got along great. But then, you know, when he stepped out and a few other drummers came in, but it wasn't until Carmine came along that it's like, this is it. And
that seems like such a far reach for like two English guys to suddenly go not only an American but like a New York American. You know, it's like you get the Italian American personality of Carmine, which I love, but I always wonder how that works with, you know, a guy from Derby and then this large Italian American personality, you know. And you guys are the rhythm section, no?
Yeah, no, I love Carmine. He's like a brother to me, and we still do things together. So
course,
I mean, but yeah, he definitely has that New York Italian thing that could not be further away from Derby. That's
there's like whatever's on his mind, he's gonna say, and you're kind of like you ruminate on what you think you want to say, that kind of thing. Where he's just like, I know.
Ruminate on it and then reason myself out of saying
yeah, exactly. Not Carmine.
yeah, but it worked, and you know, musically, it's just the music. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, we were hooked on his music before we learned too much of his personality.
Well, sometimes
I love you, Carmine. You know I do, and I told him all the time. I said, "You drive me nuts, Carmine, but I love you like a brother."
Of course, yeah.
So it just worked.
And that was more like a. You guys sort of, did you relocate to the US to put that project together, or was it sort of, how did that work?
It kind of, well, we recorded in Vancouver, a place called Little Mountain, which was
I worked there a lot. I used to work with Bob Rock.
So you know the vibe there. It's amazing place.
It had that room there's where all the Aerosmith records and the AC/DC records and the Bon Jovi records and the Motley Crue records, that huge period where all those 80s bands really exploded, were all recorded in that room in Vancouver. Yeah. So I know it well. Yeah. And you guys were in the early days of that, really, because Bob was not quite Bob Rock yet. In fact, I think the Blue Murder record really helped establish Bob as Bob.
Yeah, he did that. And then he did, I think immediately after that, he did Motley Crue.
Yes.
Which led to Feelgood.
Yeah, which led to Metallica and all the other things.
And if you listen to that, especially the opening, the single, Dr. Feelgood, or what is it? Is that what it's called? Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's the same groove as some of the Blue Murder stuff. Riot.
It's a lot funkier than Motley Crue ever was. Yeah.
And so Bob was playing them some of the stuff we did. So Bruce Fairbairn was the king of Little Mountain. So,
and that was Bon Jovi and all that stuff. Yeah, he was Bon Jovi and Aerosmith. He was the Aerosmith.
Yes. So, but it was a great place to record. Wild city, of course. I mean, we tore it up.
Yeah, it was. I know that city. A lot of very liberal, fun things to do in Vancouver, especially for guys from England, especially. But Americans loved it too. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. Our accents got us into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I was gonna say the English accent goes a long way, man. Like I must have been like, girls must just fall to their knees every time a guy order a coffee or something with an English accent.
I mean, especially then, it was 1988.
Exactly.
It was nuts. But anyway, great album came out of it, and
really did,
you
yeah.
know, it went from there. But anyway, that's that. We could go super long here, Todd. I've got to kind of keep an eye a little bit on my time.
Please, please. I honestly like. I'm actually like. I don't mean to stretch it out too much, because when we get too far into it, it's, you know, it gets kind of you know, eventually we're into the third, fourth hour. What's left to talk about?
Well, yeah, and plus,
meditation.
Is there anybody still listening?
Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, Tony, because it's you know, I think especially those two projects, because they're such, you know, there's such a huge. Like, we stop and like Miles Kennedy and the guys will bust out those Blue Murder records all the time and just be like, because they are really staggering records.
No, there was Rowan describes them. Rowan Robertson describes it as lightning in a bottle.
It really is.
That's exactly what Blue Murder was. It was a moment in time. It was the right elements, everything that came together to make something very, very special and magical and powerful that I doubt could ever be repeated. I mean, even Blue Murder couldn't repeat it. We couldn't keep it together.
It's
various reasons, but it happened.
Yeah, Sykes kind of went into a Howard Hughes mode. We're all sort of waiting for John Sykes to reappear, but he's sort of now he's like a Loch Ness monster sighting. And anytime Eddie Trunk brings him up, I'm like, you've seen him? You've spoken to him? You know, it's like
well, here's the thing with John, and people think that he's a bit of a recluse. He's in his basement and all that. I mean, after Blue Murder, you know, he kept Blue Murder going, different guys for a while, and then he went under Sykes, and then he toured with Thin Lizzy.
So he was around,
making music and recording and touring for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And, you know, he does not like the attention. You would think of him being like the consummate rock star. He is anything but.
Well, he's this tall, blonde, you know, monster guitar player. Unfortunately for him, he's just got a target written on him for attention. You know?
Yeah. And at one point, you know, we like that, don't we? It's like it's part of the deal. It may not be the original motivation, but it's like it certainly becomes a factor, and he is just not about that at all. And so, you know, it's not like he has to do anything, because people ask me the same about Jimmy Page. Why isn't Jimmy Page getting out there? You know yourself, to get out on the road, you have to really want to do it. You know, Absolutely. It is hard work. It is psychologically, mentally, and physically draining and hard work. And, you know, John and Jimmy are both in the position, they're blessed that they don't have to work.
Yeah, I think that Led Zeppelin is one of the first that came along that didn't have to do anything if they didn't want to. It explains a lot of why all those guys had very casual, you know, I mean, Robert did his thing, but it seemed more like he did it because he wanted to, not because he had to. He's not out playing county fairs and all those kind of things. You know, it's like he does what he wants to do. Unfortunately, that's an exception to a much larger rule, which is why I'm playing the county fair. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, we're still working.
Exactly. That's the important thing. Yeah.
I mean, we love it. Of course we do. What else would we do? You know, and this part of me, I think about that. Hey, if I'd have got comfortable, I've created and been involved in so many cool things since
Absolutely.
Then.
Absolutely.
And I may not have had that motivation. It definitely changes your motivation. So, you know, for John or Jimmy to want to get out there, they've got to really want to do it and be psychologically and physically wanting to do that, because both of those guys cannot do it by half measures.
No, not at all.
You know, they can't. There's such a high bar that they say it may be even unreasonable for them to reach that, or maybe they should just go out and play acoustic guitar and just play and be low key and not try to live up to their own expectations.
You're right, because it almost, you know, anything they do that isn't going to match that would be deemed a failure in the eyes of some, you know, very, very, you know, critical kind of mind. So F them. Yeah. So when did the I'll try and beat around a couple things here and then we'll cut you loose. But when did you finally get the Tony Franklin Fender Precision fretless bass? Like, when did you actually have the signature bass? When did that actually become a reality?
Oh, that's of course the continuing from the Jocko story and the me buying the Precision bass and all that. Well, I got the P bass, and this is great, but I'm not getting that kind of Jocko punch, and I can't get those harmonics to jump up. Oh, look, there's that extra pickup on there. That must be what it is. So on the back of a Kiss album, I see that they use DiMarzio pickups. So I'm thinking, oh, DiMarzio pickups must be loud. So I'm going to get a DiMarzio.
Kiss uses them. Yeah.
So I went to the local music shop in Derby. And I said, I want a DiMarzio bridge pickup for my bass. And they said, well, what kind? So the loudest. And so they gave me one. I installed it myself in the back garden of my parents' house. This was July of 1983, because I inscribed it on the inside of my fretless bass. So
that's amazing.
I mean, that was a year before the firm started. So
Great.
I was still, exploring and that.
Experimenting,
Yeah. And then, so, okay, that's cool. What I didn't know is that the DiMarzio and the P-bass stock pickup have exactly the same output levels. Because the DiMarzio is hotter. A regular jazz bass is pickup is quieter.
Right.
And so it was another fortunate twist of inevitability.
Sure.
And so it's like, but I need to be able to switch. So a Strat 3-way switch would be perfect.
There you go.
So I got one of those and put it in. It seemed like I didn't want to lose the master volume, master tone. I didn't want to add the extra volume thing because it was too much work.
Right.
And I'd have to make another hole for the input jack or the output jack, and say, that would be the easiest way. So there was the bass, and I came to work for Fender in 2003.
Right. How long were you at Fender?
I was for 8 years.
Oh, that long? Okay, wow.
Yeah, I did artist relations, so that was part of the journey too.
Is that what brought you to America? Sorry, this is the other thing I wanted to touch on. Is your
No, it was Blue Murder initially.
So that actually you relocated to Los Angeles, I assume.
Yeah, because both Carmine and John were in LA.
I see. Okay, so there you go. So you've been there a long time. You're local. Yeah.
I kind of am. Almost 31 years almost.
That's amazing. Wow.
So and so anyway, I'm working at Fender. No thought of the signature bass. It was never part of my agenda.
Right.
It was like, it was the NAMM show, January 2004.
Okay.
I'm doing artist relations for Fender, and at that point, SWR bass gear was part of the Fender brand.
Okay.
So I'm in the Fender booth. I'm just demonstrating the gear and all that, being a good,
as you do,
good artist rep.
Yes, of course.
And so I had my firm fretless, and so. One of my longtime friends at Fender said to me, "Oh, that's a man's bass. It's a chunky bass, It's like, So, oh yeah." I said, "You really have to dig in to play this." And he was looking it over, and I said, "That's pretty cool." I said, and it just popped into my head. Hey, if you don't ask, the answer's always no, isn't it? But I thought, what would you think about doing a signature bass with it? I had never thought about it until that very moment.
That's funny.
And so he went over and brought over the head of marketing.
Okay.
And who also oversaw all the guitar and basses. And so he asked him, and I was friends with him too. So Tony said, well, what do you think about doing a signature bass with this? And he looked at it. Yeah, okay.
That was it? Successful meeting.
Well, that was it. It was quick as that, but it takes a couple of years because you have to put it in the lineup of everything and developers and everything.
Sure,
Not that there was much to develop. I mean, it's essentially the same bass, but the timing and everything has to be right with all the other products that are on the product line and everything. So what was I going to say? Well, the nice thing is it actually made sense because it was an existing model, the fretless precision bass, which had gone away.
Yes.
So it was a legitimate thing.
So it had been gone since 79? Is that what you said?
It's something around that time.
Okay, yeah.
So it's
been gone like 20, 30 years by that point or something.
Yeah. So it was a classic model that was going to be revisited, but with modern additions.
So it has your 3-way switch and all that on it? I see. That makes a lot of sense.
And I wanted I've been using one with Ebony since 2005. No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
before that, early 2000s,
Okay,
because
wow.
my firm fretless has the rosewood, and that just got chewed up.
Oh, it did. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with I
And
was
the
using,
ebony's a lot stronger.
yeah, a lot more
Yeah,
durable.
yeah.
And I was using rotor sounds back in the day, which just
Sure, yeah.
chewed it up.
Yeah, yeah. They'll do that, yeah.
So it's like I need to have an ebony board on this. So that was it. That was the bass, and still in production. 14 years later, and just
I
added
know.
the Lake Placid blue color. So
It's
it's a long
beautiful.
time for a signature based a signature instrument to be in the product line.
Well, it's not just, a P bass with a different color or something on it. It's actually like a completely different instrument. And I don't think you're going to get a better fretless bass, especially when it comes to a fretless precision bass. I mean, of course, I think they're just going to keep making the Tony Franklin bass because it is a very different instrument than anything else in their line.
That is to its advantage. I mean, I did have the
Absolutely.
fretted version out, which lasted for about 5 years.
Oh, cool.
There's a lot more competition, shall we say, in the product line
Yeah,
for the fretted bass. I mean,
of course,
so
yeah.
the at this point the fretless stands alone, so it's been to its benefit, and of course that's all I play. So I'm a great ambassador. I would play it even if I wasn't a signature artist.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of it. And I think that's the most interesting thing about my friends would always say things like, well, when Tony plays, he can play fretless bass where it sounds like it's fretted. And I always go, and I've watched you enough times now to kind of go, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've seen you bring a fretted bass on occasion as well, but when just watching you play and then throwing in those little kind of fretless moves, you go, but it's never like, I've watched a number of guys and I've jammed a number of times, and I own a couple. I got to find a Tony Franklin, but I'm in that early stage where you talked about where you're like, well, it sounds fine when I'm playing it, but I remember watching Sting play Every Breath You Take on something not that long ago on an upright thing, and it was a little toony. I have to admit, I was kind of like, And this is a guy who probably came up on an upright of some sort, but it's just, there's so much, like you say, you almost have to be playing more by ear with the guys around you rather than, well, my finger's in the right position. Why is this not working? It's more like, well, you have to figure out, am I flat? Am I sharp? What am I doing wrong? And you just kind of have to adjust to the room,
Well, yeah, and that's another reason why I am anti-lined fretless, because those lines are not 100% accurate.
They're deceptive. They're very deceptive. Yeah.
Yes, there's a few spots on it where it's like it's so off, and you can do it with the tuner. Like for instance, if you have an open D, right, open D, and on the 11th fret of the top string, make an F sharp, right?
Okay.
So it's like making a little chord,
like a minor or like a major chord. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You do it both open D, put it with the tuner, and then you finger the F sharp and put it perfectly in tune with the tuner. Play the two together, it sounds off.
Yeah,
and
I know.
It's like you have to flatten it a little bit, and then it sounds right. And so people get hung up on that. There's spots all over the fretless neck where that happens, and it's like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not lined because I'd be on the wrong spot.
And the lines deceive you into thinking, well, I'm here, so it's got to be you guys, or something like that. And I think you have to do what you did, which is basically just dive right in and live in that world where you kind of like, you almost can't really go back and forth where you're, or at least you spend so much time playing the fretless that you just become so comfortable, even with this particular instrument. Because I would imagine from one to the next, even there's going to be variations depending on what's going on.
It can. I mean, thankfully, I only own one kind of bass. I don't even own any other brands or any other models. That's all I have.
That's so cool.
And so they're all pretty much, they're all exactly the same. So it's, that is a nice thing. But yes, it can vary. But those anomalies are pretty universal, I find.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it will make you a better player because you gotta learn to really study those things and listen. And when you listen that closely, you start listening to everything closely, and that makes you just a whole more aware and a better player. And so
totally, it's I mean,
cool.
Anything that teaches your ear to be sharper, I imagine, is just going to make you that much better a player.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, I've kept you more than long enough. We didn't even get into part 2 is Whitesnake and all that stuff. We'll talk about all that, but
there's lots yet.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's lots yet. There'll be a part. Well, we'll do a part 2 if I can convince you. But otherwise, what do you got coming up? Any plans?
Gosh.
Yesterday the world was closed, and then today they were saying, it's like I felt like it was like we're gonna baby steps our way, and then the next day it's like boom, a million dates are announced and all these tours. I'm like, whoa, what happened? Where's the baby steps?
Yeah. Well, nothing like major tour wise at this point. I've not been part of one specific band for a long time. I've toured with Jason Bonham. In 2019, I toured Japan with a major artist out there.
Yeah.
I've done all sorts of different things. Been to Italy with major artists and just different things. But I have a couple of rock and roll fantasy camps coming up in November and December. That's down in Florida.
Great.
I'm always busy doing recording sessions. That's been keeping me so busy during this time. Very thankful for that.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, producing some artists, and then the side project VHF has just have an album coming out through Golden Robot.
Wonderful.
I've just signed my own solo band deal with Golden Robot. The ink is not even dry yet. So
great. That's exciting.
Going to be.
Who's in the band?
I'm not going to even say at this point.
Okay, well, it's very provocative. I love it.
Yeah, but I've been a sideman or band member for so many years. I'm not going to be singing. I'm going to be leading it. I'll be like the Jimmy Page who has the overview and producing it.
Sure.
But it's really.
I think it's time for that. I'm glad to hear that. I think it's time for that. Though. Yeah.
And Golden Robot really gets that. In fact, they encourage it. They don't care necessarily about names.
Right.
I'll tell you that Stephen Perkins is going to be playing drums from Jane's Addiction.
He's one of the most underrated drummers on the planet.
Yes, and we've known each other for 25 years.
He's amazing.
Played a lot of gigs together, and I love it because he has a very fresh and unique approach, very tribal, and very almost orchestrated with how he goes about things.
Totally.
And so I'm excited about that, and so very much looking forward to that. And then just a memoir in the works. I got so many stories and things.
It's time. Yeah, I mean, like listening to this stuff, I'm just like literally like I've asked these questions a million times, and like I say, anytime Eddie Trunk or somebody stumbles across, I'm always like, tell me what you know about that particular. So hearing it from you, which is, I've had the opportunity to sit there and bend your ear many times about this stuff, but it's, there's a lot of us out there who want to hear all about the Firm and the Blue Murder and all that stuff that you've done is so much of it is kind of like, it's been a big part of people's, inspiration along the way, that there's these touchstone records that were a big deal, It's like a few years for you here and there, but it's like it really means a lot to a lot of people.
Well, thank you. And I hear that quite a lot through social media. I put a post and people will put up some very touching messages and YouTube and all that. And it's like, wow, you realize that what it meant to people and all that. I mean, I played fretless because of Jaco Pastorius. People tell me they play fretless because of me.
Because of you. Wow. Yeah, honestly, like, as much as I was aware of Jaco, I think it was so outside to just the regular rock and roll guys that it was Tony Franklin that we all went like, oh, like that, that's what you're talking about. Okay. And understanding how that would work in a rock song as opposed to a jazz exploration of, where you kind of half expect that kind of insanity. But no, I think it makes a big difference. But
So it's wonderful and very humbling to hear a lot of that stuff. So I mean, I have so many of the details. I mean, we went into a fair bit of detail, but I have all the bits in between and the.
Well, you got to save that. You have to save that for the memoir. You can't give all the details.
Yes. I can't give it all away.
No, you can't. Never give it all away.
Anyway,
it would be. Yeah, we'd be here for days. Yeah.
I do the audio book as well.
There you go.
So much I want to do. I mean, I'm constantly writing and all that stuff. So the people need to hear My music, they do.
do.
There's been bits here and there, but I'm excited to get that out. And hey, just give a quick shout for where people can find me, because I'm very active
Please.
on social media. Everything is under Fretless Monster.
Yes.
Twitter /Fretless Monster, Instagram /Fretless Monster. Even YouTube is Tony Franklin, the Fretless Monster, and blah blah blah. Fretless Monster. Put it in there, and
I love it.
Come smiling on your screen.
That's great, man. Like, I'm really excited. When do you anticipate having the solo record out, or I mean, is it still
really
in the
when
works?
it's done? But I definitely have an urgency, because I don't like to sit around and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's already begun, and so we're going to do an EP probably of 6 songs to start with.
Great.
Because it's it's a lot more manageable, and rather than just putting out a full album to start with, go with 6 songs and build it, get videos and get people aware of this. And so and
people's attention spans these days, I think 6 is a great way to start, frankly. You know, we this is an ongoing conversation outside of you and I, happening all over the place. Is 10 to 12 songs even manageable anymore? I don't even know. Like, it's a very strange thing to consider.
Yeah, it is. But it's nice to just put that focus on a smaller amount and really make them count. And then and if it does well, then you do that again, or you do a full album.
Absolutely.
But, there's plenty. You can get the idea of 6 songs of what something's all about, and leave them wanting more, right? You've got to always leave them wanting more.
You can drop 6 more next time, or give them 12. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
I've kept you more than long enough, my friend. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and
I
look forward to hanging out in person one of these days.
Oh, most definitely.
You can show me some of those tricks,
those tricks,
those bending harmonics and all that stuff. You may as well be talking about bending space and time, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, it's so easy. It's so easy.
Well, I can't wait for you to show me. Awesome.
The trick is knowing how and when to use it.
That's true. Yeah. That's the problem, is once you show me, I'll be using it everywhere. And everybody will stop that.
It's like overusing an effects pedal, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, he's put the wah on again. But,
all right,
anyway,
man.
Great.
Have an amazing
Pleasure.
day. Pass some love on to the family for me, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Big love. Take care.
Much love. Bye.
Bye-bye.